Welcome to Deadlands Dime Novels, The Adventures of Young and Holt, Issue 39, Back on Track. I'm your narrator, Ernest Wick, intrepid reporter for the Tombstone Epitaph. In this issue, Young and Holt are back together and about to make their way out of Grand Island and towards Denver. Why they're going there is still a bit of a mystery at this point, so we'll just let that be. Right now, they need to find their seats and meet the other passengers on the train. So without further ado, let's see where they're at.
You begin, you basically have gotten on the train and left the chaos of sorts that was in Grand Island behind. It is 6 o'clock in the evening, and this is essentially going to be an overnight train ride on the way to Denver. And you should be arriving just before sunrise of the following day, should everything go without incident. And it is one of those trains you certainly can move around in amongst and through the cars. Primary area where you're staying, depending, of course, on the type of ticket that you bought. And we'll say that because of Porter's gambling skill, you have been able to actually purchase sleeping cars. So you will have a place to stow your gear if you want, and then go and sleep there also if you so choose to do so. The car that you're in, it is a little worn in the sense that this one certainly has been used, but it's still, you can tell the train crew has done their best to keep it as nice as possible. The carpet is a little worn. There are a few, nicks and stains and in the woodwork on the inside, and maybe the seat cushion upholstery is a little messed up in certain areas. But for the amount of time and the age of this car, it's actually still in pretty decent shape. There are a number of other individuals in the car here with you as you make your way into the in there and find your seats. You can sit together if you like or not. I'll kind of leave that up to you guys.
When you say seating car, do you mean like a room with seats, or do you mean like the open type you usually see where there's a seat and then there's a seat to the back of it and then a seat to the back?
So it is a long thing with a number of chairs and benches. The benches are definitely rooted to the floor of the train car. The chairs appear that they can be moved in that central area. On some of the areas where the benches are, there is a table in between, so it's like a 1950s diner-esque kind of setup in that sense. There are a couple benches where there is no table, and of course there's windows on either side and whatnot. There is lights up above that aren't lit right now because there's still sun coming in, but you can see that they're obviously, it's not electricity, but it's they are like oil lamps, whatnot, but they're not lit yet. And there's a number of individuals here. A lot of them look like your common clay of the Weird West, as far as that, whether they're farm workers, other miners, perhaps heading out further out west than where you're going. There's a number of individuals here who do kind of stand out in a certain sense when compared to those people, much like you guys do, for that matter.
What? I'm just this guy on the train.
Just this guy.
Just this guy on the train with
A couple of individuals that do stand out more than most. There's one there. There's this. It's hard to tell her age, but she's very distinct that it's very distinctive that she is a nun. She has the traditional upper portion of the habit, so she's got the black and white headgear as she finds a spot and in the bench where she's sitting at. She has kind of a stocky build about her. Her lower clothes, so everything else that's not her habit headgear, is all far more functional to where you're at and what people do. So it's she's got a rugged looking shirt on, It looks like she's wearing pants and boots, and of course, cross around the neck, all of that. And her clothes are worn, but they look like they're well cared for. She also has a very, I can't say that a nun has resting bitch face, but she has a very stern look on her face in that sense. So it looks like she's
solemn,
determined, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Focused
would be another good, far better than the words I just used. So,
but we all knew you wanted to say it anyway.
well, it was like that could encompass it, but then yes, but these are much more appropriate descriptive words, I guess, in that sense. There is also one woman seated here, not in the same bench. She's in a different bench, and she is sitting with some other individuals right at this time. She's very well dressed, formal gown, with the hoop and all that kind of stuff. Hair done up perfectly, got the little hat on. Her dress is in some shiny greens with maybe some silver and gold type highlights on her dress, and she appears to already be actively engaged in conversation with them. Joshua, as you get on board and are looking, she makes immediate eye contact with you, and she smiles. She has a little fan, which she has in one hand, and when she does make eye contact with you, she kind of snaps the fan shut and just gestures with the closed fan slightly, and looks at you and smiles, gives a little nod of her head.
He will tip his worn Stetson at this point and nod back in politeness.
Let's see who else might stand out here as well. There is another man who is sitting right now. He has just taken a spot in a chair against the side of the car and has set a bag down at his side. He is in a dark green suit. He has dual 6-shooters on each hip, or a 6-shooter on each hip.
Been there, done that.
It's a 4-gun kid.
Yeah, he has guns just strapped around his thighs, so he can just kind of go around in a circle. But gun on each hip. The suit is very nice looking suit. Porter, you're actually kind of impressed by this suit.
Yeah, but I don't think Porter would have thought about it. That's the thing.
No, you certainly could have. You definitely would have had the chance and the money.
He probably would have gotten his cleaned.
Yeah, that's true.
Joshua's a bit out of breath by the time he gets to the train with Porter, so he's going to take a few deep breaths to not look rushed. Then step up and into the passenger car from the station platform. Slowly and carefully, he's going to take those steps in his slick and beaten boots. And once in the car, he's going to look around and take in to see who's on it and what seats are available. He's going to be looking for a seat by the window. Also, Porter's rubbed off on Joshua, so he picked up some new clothes in the city, as well as a couple of shirts, since he goes through them so fast. From the passenger's perspective, they would see Joshua as an elderly man, medium height, smaller than average build, wearing dusty but mostly clean double vest of black and gray over the white cotton shirt. Sleeves are rolled up, gives him a little bit of relief from the stuffiness in the car and the heat of the day. And even though Porter's fashions have rubbed off on him, Joshua still carries his guns, but they've changed a little bit since Deadwood. So he now wears his twin leather rigs with one LeMat holstered under his left arm and the other holstered on his left hip. No, he still wears the same dark brown Stetson, but it's got the new science goggles he picked up from Samuel. Joshua's wearing them like a trophy. Uses them as a conversation piece. Also, Joshua's hair would be a bit unkept underneath his hat since he was just in a fight with those Iron Dragon guys. And a few days worth of stubble on his chin since he really hasn't had a chance to get cleaned up. He picked up a new pipe in Minneapolis, smooth copper bowl, stem of some sort of bone. Once he gets to his seat by the window, he's going to crack it open a little bit, sit down, start piping it with one of the new blends he picked up in Minneapolis. Crack the window for politeness towards the lady folk. Doesn't want his puffs of that pungent smoke to give him coughing spells.
Are you going to sit in a chair, Joshua, or are you going to try and grab a bench?
I'm grabbing a bench.
You're going to grab a bench, Porter? Okay.
So if he wants to join me or not, that's up to him.
True.
Yeah, I'll grab a bench across, since the benches are facing each other, across from Porter, next to a window, and kind of gaze out the window and every once in a while look over at Porter, trying to judge his current mood.
Sleeping cars on a train, or in this case, what are they like?
Basically, it's a small cabin, a very small cabin with probably a bench on either side, and then right above that bench is essentially the bunk, which is built into the cabin, which, depending upon your height, may or may not fit you properly. You know, as far as width goes, it's probably no wider, I would say, than 5'10", 5'8", maybe. So anybody who's taller than that would have to sleep, bent kneed inside that cabin. And there's a little curtain that draws across.
So it's a 2-person cabin?
It would be a 2-person cabin. You probably could have gotten single-person cabins, but you decide, unless you guys want to, I would figure that you would have used your money for the ticket to get a dual cabin like that. But you certainly could have footed the extra cost and gotten 2 single-person cabins.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, I don't think they're really meant for sitting and enjoying the train ride as much as just going in, stowing your gear, and crawling into bed and sleeping.
Exactly.
Well, I'm planning for things further ahead.
Gotcha.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah. Now I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Cool. So, and then I'm assuming, Porter, you're going to, because you constantly have your cards in your hand, you're going to sit at a bench where there is a table?
Oh, yeah, of course. There's not a table in front of me. Something's wrong.
All right. Perfect. So, Joshua, you grab your window seat. Porter, you sit on the opposite side. If you want to sit against the window as well, Porter, you can. Otherwise, because there's nobody in there at the moment. But...
Okay, if there's no one sitting there, I'll probably kind of sit in the middle until someone says otherwise, or decides to sit down.
Just as you're lighting up your pipe, Joshua, this older-looking gentleman comes, and he doesn't do it rudely, but he just essentially sits down next to you and nods to both of you. He sets down a newspaper on the table, reaches in to a chest pocket in his suit that he's wearing.
Hand goes my gun.
He stops basically kind of halfway out, and he looks at you and raises his other hand. Just getting my cards, sir.
Sorry, have it.
He looks where your guns are. I can imagine. He sets down a deck of playing cards. You do notice immediately on his face...
He has a fantastic mustache.
He does have a nice mustache, actually. He's older, for sure. He has wisps of gray hair that come out from underneath his hat. And he sets the cards down. He takes his hat off and uses both hands to kind of get control of his hair wisps a little bit and kind of mat them a little bit to his head. And you can see he doesn't have much hair on his head, and he does this whole thing very quickly, so it's a very kind of quick thing, and he puts his hat back on. But you each can make a notice roll. Porter got a 4, you got a 3. Okay, so Porter, you notice this. Joshua, you see this, but you don't see this level of detail that I'll tell Porter. It is very obvious on parts of his face and even on his neck, even though he has a little bit higher collar of a shirt, and it's, of course, buttoned up as well. He has a couple of scars on his face. I should say it's more than a couple. It looks like there's several scars on his face and his neck, even on the top of his head. All are in various states of having been healed. None of them look fresh, but some look like they've been around for a little longer than others, basically. Porter, you notice that he has used, in some areas, he has used makeup to hide additional scars. And you can even tell, it looks like he may have even have one that's on his hand, as he was, quickly trying to fix his hair, then putting his hat back on, that there is, he had a couple scars on his hand as well. But he does his thing, and he has his cards set down in front of him. He made his comments that he said to you, Joshua. He nods to both of you, gentlemen, and then he picks up his newspaper, unfolds it, and immediately begins to read and mind his own business.
He took out his newspaper after taking out his cards?
He had set his newspaper down first on the table, and then got his cards, set those down in front of him, and then picked up his newspaper and started reading.
Gotcha.
You're looking a little worse for wear there, sir.
He flips the paper down. I'm sorry, come again?
Looks like you got quite the tale to tell there.
Oh, he shuts his paper, and just his left hand goes to one of the scars on his, that's obvious on his cheek. Oh, yes, I've been in a scrape or two, of course. When you get as old as I am, you're bound to run into various bits of trouble.
I guess I'm nearly there.
Yeah, he gives you a little once over. Yes, you're look like you perhaps have been on the same boat I have as well.
I like to say, chewed up and spit out.
He nods at that, and he says, that would be a very apt description. I like that. Sometimes it feels very much that way. He gestures again. I'm not the gunman that you appear to be, but he pats his chest. But of course, I always make sure I do protect myself.
I'm not the gunman I once was either. But you get some of these young kids think they're all that.
He looks over at the guy in the green suit who's busy talking to some woman who's nearby. He's like pointing at his guns, and he's gesturing very extravagantly. The old guy sitting with you looks towards him, and he says, "Yeah, I knew many people like that. Sadly, they weren't around very long. Forgive me, Monty Raven." He reaches over and shakes your hand, or reaches to shake your hand, Joshua.
Who gladly accepts it. Mr. Raven, name's Joshua Young.
It's a pleasure. And you, sir? He reaches across the table towards Porter.
Porter.
Excellent. You, Porter, are your cards out at this point in time as well?
It's honestly a nervous habit most of the time, so he was probably just, riffling the deck or just casually shuffling, not really paying attention to what he's doing with them.
He says, "Oh, I see that you play with the cards as well. Perhaps once we get underway, maybe a hand or two."
I think I'd like that.
Excellent. That sounds good. And he flips his paperback open and up, and begins reading once again. And within about 5 minutes, you hear the train whistle blow from outside. You hear the conductor shout, and with a lurch, the train slowly begins its exit from Grand Island. It starts chugging along the way.
Joshua's going to take a tentative look out the window and try to keep an eye out for any iron dragon that might have been pursuing us onto the train. Kind of that nervous, keeping an eye out, so to speak.
Is this an Iron Dragon train?
You know, that's a really good question. I may be able to even answer it here. Let me look. This is a Wausau Trail. Yeah, so this is not an Iron Dragon. This is a Wausau Trail line. So you're safe in that respect, Porter. You wouldn't be able to tell if they're Iron Dragon or not, but there certainly are Chinese on this train. You've seen them come and go here and there, so they are there, but they don't. None of them seem to pay any attention to you in any way, shape, or form in that regard, other than to make that brief amount of eye contact with you, and that's about it. All right, so you are actually keeping You're keeping your cool pretty well. Certainly, people are looking at you. The nun I mentioned earlier, you do catch her looking at you. The very well-dressed woman also has taken a look at you from time to time. The guy in the green suit, he has looked over. He looked over in your direction. He did make eye contact with you. He seemed, though, to be paying almost a little bit more attention to Joshua. And there's one other individual here who you absolutely caught making eye contact with you, and you've been around enough to know that whoever this guy is, he is looking more at the rail car to kind of size up the room and everyone in it. He's dressed in a lot of black hair, black hat, thin mustache, short coat with a little vest, single pistol at his side. He clearly has been taking stock of this room.
I want to keep somewhat of an eye on that last guy.
Okay.
I've been on trains enough. I've probably been on one or two that have been robbed. I want to keep an eye on him to see if he does anything that seems more of that nature. Maybe checking out the window for looking for cohorts, or fiddling with his gun, or keeping a very close watch on the time, or something of that nature that might give him away.
He does some of those things. Yep, he could be possibly an inside man for a robbery, or maybe he's rail security, possibly.
Okay.
Or something else. It's difficult to tell exactly. He is also playing it very cool. It's like, so if you're like doing this notice game of this notice cat and mouse game, it's one of those kinds of things.
Alright, I'm going to make another stealth roll to somewhat gesture to Joshua about him while not informing the guy who's got his newspaper flipped up in front of him. Porter's still a little jumpy, so he may not make it as... Oh, wow.
Damn, dude.
Porter's like leaning across, about to like, hey.
Joshua noticed all of it. 21 on a d6.
I would say a 21 would absolutely get you that. Go ahead.
And then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I know.
So after Porter is obvious about, hey, Joshua's going to turn his back so it's more towards the window so he can see inside of the cabin, and do it. He's trying to get comfortable, pesky hard bench seats, and just twisting a little bit so that his knees are pointed more inside the car in case he needs to shuck something.
So Porter's sitting there, and he's got his hand kind of somewhat across as he was trying to get Joshua's attention. He's like, are you getting a sense of deja vu here?
Huh. I don't see anybody named Six Shots.
Or anybody named Derek Ingersoll.
Yes. Yeah, so Porter's going to be a little more jumpy now.
The train takes off and begins just chugging down the tracks. Not a problem. Within about 15 minutes after it has gotten up to speed and going, the conductor comes through, introduces himself. His name is Zeke. Goes from passenger to passenger, checking tickets. He gets to your table, or your little bench table set up there. Gentlemen, tickets, please.
That's going to be offered immediately. Actually, with a little fumbling as I kind of rush myself.
Joshua digs around a little absent-mindedly before he pulls one out of the inside vest pocket.
All right. Excellent. Oh, I see. Oh, and the two of you, all right, and you are aware of where the sleeping cars were? They told you about that?
That they were that way, right?
Yes. Yes. Down there would be, he looks at your ticket as he hands it. 2 cars down.
Ah.
The room number is right there on the ticket.
Thank you kindly.
Of course. He takes Monty's ticket as well, checks that, goes down. You can't quite hear it over the interior train noise, but when he gets to the dude in the green suit, he starts really just talking to the conductor like quite a bit, just really talking him up, and the conductor or Zeke is just kind of nodding his head as he's.
Hey Joshua, are you sure that's not you from like 20 years ago?
I would like to think I would. Yeah, I guess it could be. I never dressed that sharp though back then.
You don't dress that sharp now.
Ah, you helped me pick this out.
You couldn't pull that off.
Monty flips down his paper. I used to dress like that, well dressed like that in my youth. He looks. Yeah, I don't think nice clothes like that would have ever worked on you. He looks at Joshua. I'm not saying that you can't pull it off. I'm just saying it just doesn't strike me as what you would wear.
Well, back in my youth, sleeping on the ground, eating trail dust every night. Good clothes don't last long. You need something sturdy.
That's very true. It's very true.
Or you could just not sleep on the trail.
Well, when you got 20 armed men to pursue it, that's a story for another time.
Monty's paper is like half flipping up, half flipping down, as like he's about to say something, but then you do the 20 armed men, and he just kind of, well, his paper comes down, then as he's listening, and then you get done, and he flips it back up. About 10, another 15 minutes or so after all of that happens, you see the very well-dressed woman come stand up and make her way down the car, and she comes she's heading right towards your guys' booth there, and Joshua, and she has her fan out again, and she's making eye contact with you.
As she gets within proximity, Joshua will be nice and polite and stand up, because that's what a gentleman does when a lady approaches.
And
Porter's like, what are you doing? Because, of course, his back is to her approach.
Yes.
He has no idea.
Monty, as you stand up, Monty flips his paper down, and he stands up as well, seeing what's happening.
Porter does like a double take over his shoulder. Oh.
And she comes right to the edge of the table. Thank you, gentlemen. She looks to the half-empty spot, since Porter was kind of sitting in the middle of the bench. Do you mind?
Oh, please. And scoots himself over towards the window. Out of the way.
Thank you kindly. And she slides herself in there. She flicks her fan back open and begins fanning. It's a pleasure to meet you all, gentlemen. My name is Victoria Grace. We're from the Grace Overland Shipping Company back out east. I couldn't help but notice, and she leans in slightly towards you, Joshua. Are we all on our way to Denver? Is that where we're going?
Joshua will sit back down as she's, having this conversation and flipping her fan and take a couple of puffs off of his pipe, just lost in her face a little bit. Yes, I believe that is our destination.
And she looks, she glances sideways. And you as well, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
And Monty he nods. Oh, I am also headed to Denver. This is going to be my first time this far out west. I am on a bit of an adventure of my own, just to go and see the little wide world. Daddy has been more than kind enough to allow me to do this, and as well as, of course, to check in on possible business interests. But
I must confess, and she leans in and she bats her fan a little bit more fervently. I have found it to be quite exciting meeting a number of individuals. And she looks at you, Joshua, and please don't think me to be presumptuous, sir, but I am willing to wager that those guns upon your hips there, that you have used them a number of times. Would I be correct in that assumption?
You would be correct in that assumption, ma'am. And where might you originally be from?
You say that, her eyes just widen and her smile grows bigger. I am from originally from Richmond, Virginia. So, do tell. Can I ask you some further questions then in regards to your profession?
I will answer what I can.
Porter just kind of leans in with a little smile. puts his chin on his hands and just kind of like,
Joshua takes another long puff off of his pipe, starts searching his mind for old stories, and waits for the questions.
She says, I have found it fascinating. Now, I have read a number of stories and been privy to a number of stories about famous gunslingers and duelists throughout this part of the West. You don't get very much of that back east, and I find the lifestyle to be truly fascinating. Now, of course, Daddy has made sure that all in his family know how to shoot a gun, and I know how to shoot a gun, but for someone such as yourself to do that for a living, that just interests me to no end. So, do you know how many men that you have killed with those guns? She just continues to bat her fan very excitedly.
Well, I think, ma'am, you might be a little confused. There's really not much romantic about ending a man's life, even in self-defense.
Oh. Very interesting to hear you say that. It is something that has troubled you to do that?
Well, one does do what they need to do to get by. However, it isn't something you do, well, when you do it quickly, but it's not something that you... Tongue-tied already.
She leans in a little bit more. That's all right. You take your time.
You know, a man does what he must in spite of the consequences and the obstacles. But one does have to consider morality in a lot of situations.
Indeed. And would you say the men that you have killed then, did they have it coming? Was it a morally right thing to do?
In my youth, no. Older I get, yeah.
Oh, so indiscretions of youth, perhaps making a few mistakes along the way.
Yeah, I think one's gotta learn the hard lessons of life. Pulling the trigger too easy leads to more hardships than usual.
You are not the first gunslinger to tell me such things. I ran into a gentleman in Chicago who spoke in a similar manner. He expressed a number of regrets for some of the things that he did. I'm curious, though, if I may continue to proceed with my line of questioning. If you find things like this to be a difficult path of sorts, why do you do it? Why are you on the path that you are on?
Porter looks to Joshua.
Well, we're all given gifts in this life, and this was a gift that I was given. I'm still trying to figure out exactly why I was given this gift, but I'm trying to use it responsibly. And, you know, sometimes you just go where the story takes you, and I'll look over at Porter.
Oh, I see. Oh, the two of you traveled together.
Yes.
Oh, are you an apprentice of sorts then for him?
I kind of look. I look at him. An apprentice, huh?
One might say my encouragement.
Oh, perhaps. Yes, I mean, or at least a travel confidant, I guess. So you do not live by the gun like this gentleman here does. Then she addresses Porter.
Oh no, I bet you could outshoot me, ma'am.
Well, Daddy did say I was always a crack shot. Let me ask you again, and she turns back towards you, Joshua. So, I know you say there's not much romance in this, but I have had one or two gunslingers confess this to me as I have encountered them along the way. Have you ever had to duel your guns for the affection of another? Or in relation to the affection of another?
Don't rightly know what you're trying to say there, ma'am. Are you wanting to know if I quarreled with another man over the affections of a love interest?
Yes, I guess would be another way to say that, yes.
Joshua leans back, puffs on his pipe. Can't say that I have, ma'am, but I have borne witness to such duels. Let's see. I think it was a fall, several years back now. There was a local school marm. Joshua takes another puff off his pipe, looks past her, as if he's seeing the events again in his mind. It was my bad luck showing up in that new town when a pair of fellas were squaring off against each other. I don't remember the town's name, but local man filled me in as I watched the events play out. You see, this marm, she'd been courting two cowpokes that rode for different ranches. When one was out on a drive, she'd be showered by gifts and doted on by the first fella. Then, when the first was out on a drive, the second would be in town calling on her. Evidently, this had gone on for nearly a year. All the visits had been months apart. She had no fear of being found out. But, her bad luck, there was a drought that had struck. Both cowpokes came a-calling on the same day. One thing led to another, and well, you know, two hot-headed young boys slapped leather because of the perceived insult. In the end, one feller was dead, the other left out of town, and the marm, well, she was all alone. You know, thinking back, those cowpokes shot at the wrong target. But both young men felt they had to show strength and couldn't let go of that slight, so you know, ma'am, the stronger a man is, the more gentle he can afford to be.
Ooh, I like the way that sounds. That reminds me of a man who came calling on me. That's an interesting way to say things. She wrinkles her nose slightly. That tobacco, though Daddy operates a shipping company and we deal in a number of products, tobacco being one of them, I am going to surmise that that tobacco perhaps comes from South Carolina. That seems to have that aroma. My senses in that is not necessarily so good, so I'm going by my minimal exposure to it. My brother is much better at that than I am, but it seems as that may be South Carolina tobacco. Do you know?
I must confess, ma'am, that I do not know this tobacco's origins. However, I did pick it up in a nice little shop in Minneapolis.
Let us just assume then that it is in South Carolina tobacco, and then we can both feel comfortable in the fact that I was right.
Well, someone as knowledgeable as you, and with such a background, I would feel safe in what you have said.
So what brings the two of you then? Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Are you with... She looks towards Monty. Are you with them? And he just shakes his head and... no, ma'am, I am not, but I'm enjoying the line of questioning. Oh, well, thank you very much. So...
Glad one of us is.
I'm sorry. Am I making you uncomfortable? I don't want to make you uncomfortable.
No, ma'am. I'm just glad somebody's getting enjoyment out of our discussions.
I'm enjoying this very much, too.
Monty kind of chuckles a little bit. So she turns to Porter. So, the two of you, the master and the apprentice, where are you, what is your business in Denver?
Actually, Ma'am, he's accompanying me out to Denver for one of my relatives out there informed me of a card game that I intend to play in.
Monty's paper flips down when you say that. Ooh, cards, yes. Daddy often, when he has had his business associates over after dinner, they usually retire to cigars and bourbon and cards. I have not yet had the privilege of sitting down and playing with him, but my brother, he certainly has at times. So that sounds very exciting.
I'm going to make another notice check. Is there someone watching her interactions? I'm looking for, like, her brother that she mentioned before, or maybe a bodyguard.
Sure, go ahead, make me a notice roll.
Don't think she would be left alone. For.
Well, let's put it this way. It's difficult to tell. There are
She kind of stands out.
Right, she stands out. She is very attractive, so there are certainly plenty of men on board who are stealing glances at her, because she certainly is very pleasant to look at in that sense. Yeah, so it's tough to tell. You don't know if some of them are clearly, they would not be related to her in any way, nor would they be security. There are a couple that might fall into the security category, maybe her brother. Okay, so you mentioned cards. She says, so you're really more of a card player then, in that sense.
That's correct, ma'am.
Oh, I see. Well, that would explain the deck of cards there, and she points over towards Monty's deck, as well as the deck of cards there. Fascinating. She looks and she smiles at all of you, and she says, I don't mean to take up any more of your time, although it might be pleasant to continue the conversation. Perhaps, I believe dinner is going to be served within the hour. Maybe then we can perhaps talk some more. But I best go and make my rounds. She leans in a little conspiratorial towards you, and she says, that gentleman back there. And she gives a nod in the direction of the dude who is dressed in black with a thin mustache. I did speak to him earlier, and it appears that he is on the hunt for some bounties. He is chasing some criminals who have fled Kansas and are believed to be going into Denver area. And he is, as he put it, hot on their trail. So I found that to be quite fascinating. He is not the gunslinger that you are, she nods towards Joshua, but he certainly does live and die by those weapons on his hips.
Well, ma'am, I thank you for your gracious invitation to dinner. And while you leave to make your rounds, Porter, I'm going to excuse myself and go check on our horses at in the car.
That sounds like a good idea. It was a pleasure to meet you, ma'am.
And you as well. And she stands and flicks her fan open again and gives it a few sharp bats, and then turns and just almost glides back down the train car. She's you can tell her social graces are on point as she moves to go and take a seat elsewhere.
She's the exact opposite of us.
Yep.
Well, it just goes to show you never know what you'll end up talking about when you meet strangers on a train. Looks like Young and Holt are about to learn a bit more in our next issue, Dinner and Danger. The part of Porter Holt is played by Brad Smith, Joshua Young is played by Brent Rich, and your intrepid marshal is played by Chris Hussey. This game references the Savage Worlds game system, available from Pinnacle Entertainment Group at peginc.com. It is unofficial media content permitted under the Media Network Content Agreement. This content is not managed, approved, or endorsed by Pinnacle Entertainment Group. Certain portions of the materials used are the intellectual property of Pinnacle and all rights are reserved. Savage worlds, all related settings, and unique characters, locations, logos, and trademarks are copyrights of Pinnacle Entertainment Group. Thanks also to our friends at Fear the Boot. Support their Patreon at patreon.com/feartheboot. Intro music by Beelzebub Jones. Exit music by Me and Music. Contact information for the cast as well as music links can be found in the notes on our website, youngandholt.com. If you enjoy these issues, please consider dispensing a lovely 5-star review on wherever you do listen from. Please search for Fear the Boot Actual Play. It's very kindly appreciated. I'm Ernest Wick for the Tombstone Epitaph. And remember, strangers are friends you just haven't met yet.